Okay, now that we've finished the exterior, we're ready to go back and talk about the interior. Because while we were working outside, they could have been working inside. So let's go back and see what's happening in the interior. And the next section we'll discuss is the interior roughing in or rough in. Now, during the rough in, this is where you're going to have your three major subcontractors that we discussed earlier: the plumber, the heating and air, HVAC for heating, ventilating, and air conditioning, and the electrician. They'll do their rough in, and they will receive a rough in inspection by the city or county inspector, and it is normally their responsibility to get that rough in inspection. And have them on the job in this order: plumber first, heating and air second, electrician third. In commercial work, it's a little different. We'll have the heating and air first, then the plumber, and then the electrician. But in residential construction, I recommend you have plumber, then heating and air, then electrician. Because you see, the plumber, their system is fairly rigid. There's only so many ways they can go from A to B. The heating and air sub, their system is fairly rigid also, but normally not as rigid as the plumber. And the electrician, they can run their wires anywhere. So if your electrician's raring to go and you're still waiting on the plumber, do not let the electrician go in there and wire the home, because when the plumber shows up, they will accidentally or on purpose cut a bunch of those wires, and then you got a real mess on your hands. And don't have them all working there at the same time either. They'll start fussing and fighting with each other. Have the plumber get in, do his thing, and then leave. Have the heating and air sub get in, do his thing, and then leave. And then have the electrician get in there. Now, you can overlap them a little bit, just don't have them there during their major surgery. And you may really ramrod your framer to do a beautiful job framing your home. Well, you'd better get mentally prepared for these three right here, because they're going to come in with saws a-blazing. Now, don't let them cut your home down, but understand they have to do a certain amount of surgery to get in their product. And on your first home, that is very traumatic. You're better off leaving, going to get a cup of coffee, and showing up later. So let's go ahead and get started on this sequence of work for the interior roughing in. After the framer clears out, you can go ahead and, if they have the prefab stairs completed, go ahead and install the prefab stairs. Now, this is predicated on you having the felt tight enough on the roof, or you've got the shingles up there so that if it rains, those prefab stairs are not going to get wet. You do not want those prefab stairs to get wet. So either you got to have a great felt job, or you got to have the shingles up there, so if it rains, that area where the stairs are, there's no water dripping and nothing's getting wet. You can go ahead and have your prefab fireplace subcontractors in there to install your metal prefab fireplaces. They'll install the firebox and they'll run the flue up through the home. And then on top of the chimney chase, they'll put a metal pan. And then I recommend you spend the additional money, and on top of that metal pan, you have them, build and install what we call a shroud. You can see photos of this at 24/7. I think that shroud looks a lot better than those round metal pipes in most cases. And on your fireplaces, whether it be a prefab, metal prefab, or an all masonry fireplace, one thing you may definitely want is a a gas starter in the fireplace so that you can easily start up any wood. Or you may want to convert over to gas logs in the future, or you may want to have gas logs now. And so you'll have a gas starter as part of the fireplace. Another thing that you definitely want is a fresh air vent on the fireplace. And I'll be talking about this fresh air vent in the energy section of our program. If you're going to have an all brick masonry fireplace, or if you want to go with a prefab masonry fireplace, which I really like, and I really consider them better than an all brick fireplace, and you will save money by going with a prefab masonry unit. But if you're going to do a prefab masonry unit, or you're going to do an all brick fireplace, you can go ahead and get started on that at this point. It may be a situation where you're going to furnish all the material, and you're going to hire constructed. I installed an all brick fireplace because back then they didn't have the all the different sizes and large sizes on prefabs like they do now. Nowadays, with the money you save with the prefab, good night. It would be a rare situation. I would build an all brick fireplace. As I mentioned earlier in the course, if you lived up north where you used a fireplace 9 months out of the year, yes, I would want an all brick or a prefab masonry fireplace. But in the South, there's not that many days for a good rip-roaring fire. So when you think of the money you will save with a metal prefab, I'd rather save that money and spend it somewhere else in the home. And those metal prefabs, if you deal with a good brand, I think they're great. But getting back on the first home that I built an all brick fireplace. And even though I didn't do it, I hired a mason to do it. I got several books that clearly explained how an all brick fireplace should be constructed and how they operate and everything. And in my mind, I knew how to build an all brick fireplace. And I photocopied some of those sections and I gave it to the mason, and I told the mason, I want to build my fireplace just like this. Boy, he came back and said he had never built a fireplace like that before in his life. And who was I to tell him how to build a fireplace? He'd been building fireplaces all his life, and so did his daddy. And it boiled down to, I'm sorry, but it's my home, my money, my fireplace, and bless God, you got to do it my way. And he almost didn't work for me. And cussed and grumbled, swore it'd never work. It worked like a charm. Now, I don't know about your area, but I know in the Atlanta area, I see a lot of all brick fireplaces that are constructed wrong. And there's a lot that goes into a fireplace working just right. So if your architect did not draw the design on how the fireplace should be constructed, go to 24/7 and we're going to show you how to link up with the Brick Association. And via the Brick Association, you can get drawings and specifications on how you should build an all brick fireplace. And if you're going to go to that expense, you need to build it per those drawings and specifications. It's very important. But that is one reason I like the prefab masonry unit, is because the way it's designed to work properly. And you don't have to worry about the mason messing up the flow of the air in it. Because if that thing does not pull air out properly and let smoke back in the home, it's just a waste of money. At the same time, after the carpenter finishes, you're going to be having your plumber, heating and air, and electrician in the job that I mentioned just a few minutes ago. And we'll start off talking about the plumber. Now remember, I don't want to know all there is about plumbing before I trust the plumber. I am depending on the plumbing inspector on keeping this sub or these subs basically honest. If you're out in a rural area where you do not have an inspection department, go into an adjoining city or county, hire the plumbing inspector, for example, to come out as a consultant and just check the job like they would in the city or county. Or hire a professional mechanical engineer or something like that, or a top-notch building inspector to come out and inspect it. So let's cover the things that the plumber is going to be doing. A few things I want to talk about before I mention what the plumber is going to be doing is that I told you earlier to go in and paint on the floor the location of your cabinets and vanities and your toilets and stuff like this. What I want you to do with that spray paint is I want you to paint just a rough little drawing. It doesn't have to be exact, but go ahead and paint on the floor the location of your sinks, the location of your dishwasher, the location, the size and location of your showers, and where the toilets are located. And also mark on the floor where the drain is going to be located for a tub or a shower. And you may need to have the specifications there for any garden tubs or any prefab shower units or, your jetted tubs, so the plumber can see exactly where the drain is supposed to be located. What this will do, though, when everybody comes into the home, they will quickly know where things are located, where you envision your kitchen sink to be, or a vanity lavatory, or where a toilet's going to be positioned. And they're not having to just study the drawings to quickly see where these items are located. And it also helps you have a visual idea of where things are going to be located. On the toilets, I think I mentioned this back in the plan section, but I just want to say something here. On the toilets, I like a good 36 inches width where the toilet is going to be. So it would be 18 inches on either side of the toilet. I get into a lot of situations where a vanity or the toilet is too close to a vanity or a wall, and you're just cramped. And so I like always a good 36 inches, 18 inches on either side. And you want to have it this way on your drawings preferably, but you also want to be thinking about this when the plumber is installing your toilets. On your showers especially, you're going to need to think about where you want to put the handle to cut the water on and off. You want to think in terms of being able to reach in from the door possibly and cutting the water on and off without necessarily stepping into the shower. But if it's a large walk-in shower, then you may step into it. But you want to think and know in advance where you want to cut the water on and off. Also, in some of these master bath showers, good grief, you'll see all kind of shower heads and body sprays and handheld showers and all kind of stuff. You need to know up front where you want to position all this stuff. And know this prior to the plumber walking on the job. So you can go over it with the plumber, and then he may say, well, you can't do it quite this way, or he may have a recommendation of doing it a little different, and you can make adjustments on the job site. But just don't walk in there and just have no idea where all this stuff is going. Also, on these showers, if you didn't specify all this stuff to the plumber and the plumber furnish it, which is my preference, if you're going to furnish all this stuff, you've got to have all those shower valves on the job site during the rough-in, because they are going to install all those valves during the rough-in, not just for the showers, but also for the tubs. So when you purchase those valves, go ahead and purchase the fixture that goes with it, because it could be months before you need the fixture. And if you install the valve now and then a couple of months later when you need the fixture, it may be you're not able to find that fixture, or it's been discontinued, and or they don't carry it anymore. So when you buy that valve, you go ahead and get the fixture with it, and you just keep the fixture in a safe place if you are furnishing this stuff and not giving the list to the plumber and letting the plumber furnish it. But I repeat, you need all this stuff available for the plumbing rough-in. The plumber is going to get in there and they're going to install all the sewer lines and drain lines. And on the drain lines, I want you to think about in a powder room for the vanity in the powder room. A lot of homes now in the powder room, they'll put what appears to be a piece of furniture. And you can buy these that are made for powder room vanities, for example, or really any vanity. And usually it looks like a piece of furniture where you have legs on it and you can see underneath it. That being said, if that's what you're going to have in a powder room, you want to make sure the plumber runs the water lines and the drain lines out the side, out in a wall, not through the floor. Because if they run it through the floor and you go in and put that piece of furniture, you'll look up underneath it and you'll see the drain and water lines running, below it into the floor, which doesn't look very good at all. And you're not going to be happy with it. So in those areas where you're going to have that piece of furniture, make sure you get the drain and the water lines going out the side of it in the wall. Also on the sewer and drain lines, The problem with using PVC plastic, which is what most people will use because cast iron is just way too expensive, and I think the PVC is even better than the cast iron. It won't tend to clog up over time like the arteries in your heart. It's a lot easier to work with. The biggest problem with the PVC, though, is the sound of water running through it. And the big problem is in a two-story home, in that upstairs, if someone flushes a toilet or they are taking a shower, the water will go down, hit a horizontal drain, go over to a sidewall, and drop down to the next level. When that water falls to the next level, that's where you get the bulk of the noise. And I mean, in some cases, it can be extremely loud, and most people, they don't like this. Now, we used to just wrap insulation around it and do everything we could to minimize the sound of that noise. What we'll do now is we will tell the plumber where that drain line is dropping from, let's say, the second floor down to the first floor. In that location only, we will use cast iron. And that is not a huge expense to put a cast iron drop in those locations, and it goes a long ways in minimizing the sound of that water dropping from the second floor down to the first floor when you're taking a shower or flushing a toilet. The plumber is going to be running vents up through the home, out the roof to vent off fumes. Now, these vents, you want to tell the plumber, and most of this stuff, tell them to get them on the rear of the home. You don't want to see them from the street simply for aesthetic reasons. Now, sometimes they can't help it, but normally they can. They can get all those vents to the rear of the home just so you don't see them from the street. And tell the plumber, say it would be nice if you would paint, a lot of those vents, they use the white PVC, but where it comes out of the roof, I like for it to be painted like a flat black or something like this. And if the plumber didn't do it, I'll get the painter to do it, but the plumber, it's so much easier for him. And a good plumber, they know this looks nicer. So right where the pipe sticks out of the roof, they'll paint it like a flat black. And so you're not looking at that white pipe, that white vent pipe on the roof. If the plumber fails to do it, you can have the painter do it later. The plumber is also going to be installing all the water lines to the home. And you may be from the old school like me and that you just really love to see those copper water lines. I will tell you, though, that if you went with the plastic, now the plastic you would go with that is recommended is what we call CPVC. You will tend to have less problems with CPVC than you will with copper. And CPVC is a rigid plastic line, so it's not kind of, just real limp looking in the wall. Another product that you may want to look into, especially if you live up in the northern states where it gets extremely cold, is a product called PEX, P-E-X. And you can see information about PEX at 24/7. Now, the thing I really like about PEX is if the water line freezes, unlike copper that will burst, the PEX will tend to give, expand and contract to handle a freeze without bursting. So I'll even on some large homes, if I have copper throughout, but we're getting in an area where we've got a room that could be like above a garage or something like this, that there's a possibility that in a real hard freeze, that water line could be, at risk. We will put PEX in that area. But I would not be opposed to use PEX throughout the home, and it would be cheaper than using copper. So you may want to look into that. And there's a lot of advantages to the PEX and or the CPVC over copper, other than just price. In your showers, now you can compensate for this now with a lot of different shower heads they have that you can install. But instead of putting the shower outlet on a standard shower at 6 feet, by the time you put the shower head on there, it kind of drops down to 5 feet 6 inches. If you're a tall person, you're kind of bending over to take a shower. So take your shower on a normal shower, just take your shower up to at least 6'6". And that way, if you are fairly tall, then you've got room to shower and no big deal. Now, if you're just extremely tall, you may want to go even further than that. But just be aware of where they place those outlets. One thing I want to encourage you to possibly do is, in a large home especially, you may have the water heater, let's say, on one side of the home and the master bath or kitchen on the other side, or you've got bedrooms and such, upstairs that are a pretty good distance from the water heater. So in those areas, you cut the water on and it has to run several minutes before you finally have hot water. And this is a little bit of an aggravation, not to mention a waste of water. So what I recommend you do, it doesn't cost that much, is you have the plumber install a circulating hot water line on your system. And what it's going to do is it's going to circulate hot water through the home so that in any given location, you can cut on a faucet and just in a matter of seconds, you're going to have hot water without waiting. Now, when they do this, what they're going to do is they're going to put a little pump on the water line, on this hot water line, to circulate the hot water through the home. One thing about this little pump is you want to be sure to put a timer on it so that during the night it cuts off, or if you're gone during the day it cuts off, and it only cuts on in those time periods when you're normally home and you're wanting hot water. Because if that little pump runs 24/7, what it's going to do is it's going to be circulating hot water through the home back to the water heater, and when that water gets back to the water heater, it has lost heat, and it's going to cause the water heater to kick on and run to heat it back up. So if you don't put a timer on this little pump at the end of the bill, you're going to have quite a gas bill or electric bill by running this water heater, more than normal. And that's going to be sticker shock. So you be sure to put a little timer on this little pump so that you're only utilizing the water circulating, the hot water circulating when you're there, when you're using hot water. And while I'm talking about the water heater, I think I mentioned this earlier in the program. Some of you are looking into your instant hot water heaters, which is not a new concept. This is how they've heated water in Europe for years. Many years. I love the instant water heaters. However, your one instant water heater is not going to handle the entire home. And especially if you have a large master shower with these, water sprays that utilize like about 5 gallons of water a minute, you're going to need several instant water heaters. And those things are not cheap. And when you look at the cost of putting that many instant water heaters in your home to accommodate that much hot water, boy, you could buy not only a great normal water heater, but you will save quite a bit of money. I know a lot of plumbers that install instant water heaters, and they will admit for their own home, they would install a standard water heater, not the instant water heater, because of the cost. Also on the water heater, if you don't say anything, the plumber may install a 40-gallon water heater, spend the additional money and go to at least a 50-gallon water heater, and that way you'll be glad you did. That way you can take a nice long hot shower, talking about a standard shower that is, and you won't run out of hot water. With a 40-gallon tank, you would be very limited. Now you may want to go up to like a 50-gallon water heater, which is what I would do. When you get up like into 60 gallons or more, you're getting into a commercial grade of water heater, which is fairly expensive. You could buy 2 50-gallon water heaters cheaper than you could buy one 60-gallon water heater. So that's what I do. I will buy tandem water heaters. I will put 2 50-gallon water heaters in a home to work in tandem, and the plumber will know how to do this. So it gives me plenty of hot water for a garden tub or to run that big master shower or something like this. And you may, if you're going to go with 2 water heaters, if you've got a long home where you've got the kitchen on one end, the master bath on the other, then you may want to split the water heaters where one water heater is close to the kitchen and one water heater is close to the master bath area. But you can just talk to the plumber about doing this. But I would consider 2 like 50-gallon water heaters as opposed to anything 60 gallons or larger, which gets pretty expensive. If you're in an area where they have an inspection department, this will be part of the inspection. But you just want to make sure and tell the plumber, if the plumber is any good, they'll do this automatically. But on top of your water lines and any drain lines and stuff like this that could be hit by a nail when they're installing drywall or any kind of trim molding or something like this, on top of that stud, they'll put what we used to call a stud guard, but kind of the technical name is a nail stop. And they'll put this nail stop over these water lines, these drain lines, so that when somebody comes in later, they're installing drywall or they're using a nail gun shooting in, in interior trim, they're not going to drive a nail into that water line or into that drain line, which can be a problem for you later. I mean, there's nothing worse than that nail just barely tipped that water line, and then in the near future, normally it's Friday around 8 p.m., the tip of that nail finally corrodes away and blast, you got this big water leak. What a hassle. So you make sure they get those nail stops on top of all these areas where there's any risk of a nail going into a water line or a drain line. The plumber will go ahead during the rough-in and they will go ahead and set your tubs, your normal tubs. On the tubs, as I mentioned earlier, you could go with the cheaper route is your steel tub with porcelain painted on it or baked on enamel, something like this. Or no, it's baked on porcelain. The problem with the steel tub is you can just drop something on it just accidentally and it will chip. Now this chip can be repaired, thank goodness, but it is just such an aggravation. For that reason, I really love a good old cast iron tub that weighs a ton and it costs more. Some of the acrylic tubs, I like those also. You got to be a little careful about, scratching them and how you clean them in the future. But I also like those. I like just about anything more than I like the steel tub with the baked on enamel. A lot of times they'll go ahead and put the garden tubs in at this point in time, and they'll put the fixture on the garden tub, which I kind of hate because you're fearful someone's going to steal that fixture. And on all these tubs, you need to cover them up some way, somehow. If you don't cover them up, they'll use them for sawhorses. They'll straighten out nails on them. I mean, boy, they'll just wreak havoc on those tubs. So you want to cover them up some way, somehow. You'll see a couple of examples of this in the photos at 24/7. And if the tub is going on an exterior wall, you need to get out there and you can purchase a roll of insulation or you could hire your insulation sub just to do you a little favor and come out there, and on those exterior walls where a tub is going to go, they need to put some insulation in there before they slide that tub in place. Some of your inspectors will catch this and they'll require you to do it, but if they don't catch it, which they many times will not, then that tub's going to be extremely cold in the winter, which is not very comfortable for you. And it's just not going to be efficient being on that outside wall with that insulation. So you need to get that insulation in there before they slide that tub in place, because it may not be easy to do once the tub is in place. If you're going to have a really large custom garden tub, and especially a jetted tub like a jacuzzi, I highly recommend you do not put the tub in at this point. Now, you may be in a situation where the inspector is going to say, no, the tub has got to go in during the rough-in. I hate it when that happens. And I've been in situations like that, and I would explain to the inspector, this is an expensive tub and I don't want it damaged. So I would rather install it later. And so the inspector will say, well, okay, I see what you mean, and I'll work with you. But a lot of inspectors know this and they'll work with you. But if you just are in a situation where the inspector won't do it, then you're going to need to go ahead and install that jetted tub, and you need to cover it up some way, somehow, and protect it. But my preference is you do not install these large garden tubs and jetted tubs until later, and you'll see when. Also on your showers, if you're going to build a ceramic tile shower, in the bottom of that shower, for example, the ceramic tile in the bottom of the shower may be non-porous, but the joints are not. And water will seep through those joints and leak onto your subflooring unless you know that the plumber installed in the bottom of that shower what we call a pan. Now, years ago, they used to use a solid sheet of lead. Now we use a solid sheet of heavy gauge vinyl. And we put that vinyl down, and the ceramic tile sub will build the ceramic tile floor in that heavy gauge vinyl pan. It's attached to the drain so that any water that seeps through that tile will not leak onto your subflooring or slab. This sheet of heavy gauge vinyl is not terribly expensive, but it's not cheap either. And the plumber will furnish this big piece of heavy gauge vinyl, and they'll put it down and they'll attach the drain to it. And what they normally do to pass an inspection, they have to put water in this pan to show the inspector that it's not leaking anywhere. And what's going to happen is that pan is going to get damaged during the construction of the home. And 9 times out of 10, when your ceramic tile sub shows up, what he's going to do is rip out that pan, and he's going to charge you for a new sheet of vinyl, and he's going to install a new pan the way it should be installed. So for that reason, what I like to do is leave off the pan during the rough in, and I tell the inspector, when we do the tile floor, I'm going to have the tile subcontractor install the pan so it's done correctly. And many of your inspectors, they understand what you're trying to do, and they'll work with you. And that is my preference. Let the plumber furnish the vinyl liner. You store it somewhere, and when you're ready to do your tile floor in the shower, you give this vinyl liner to the tile subcontractor. They'll install it the way it should be installed, and you don't run the risk of anybody damaging that liner. Again, if you're dealing with an inspector that says, no, we got to have the liner in there, and we got to pour water in it, and we got to inspect it during the rough-in in order to pass the rough-in inspection, then you do what you got to do and just do the best you can to protect it. But understand there's a good chance the ceramic tile sub will want to rip it out and redo it because he'll complain that it's not really done correctly. The plumber will install all the spigots per your drawings on the outside, and just think about where you want, spigots. When you're pricing the plumber, a lot of times he'll say, well, our price includes 3 spigots. If you want more than 3, you pay extra. Find out this kind of information, how much, spigots are extra. But think about this in the beginning when you're doing your drawings, where you would like to have exterior spigots located. Now, my preference would be right inside the wall from the spigot, you will have a separate cutoff where you can cut that spigot off, let's say in the wintertime, if you've got a hard freeze coming, and you don't have to cut off the entire water system. So you'll have a cutoff right inside the wall to cut off the spigot. Now, this may require to construct a little access door in some parts of the home. For example, if you're building on a concrete floor called a slab, you don't have a crawl space or a basement underneath where you could put this cutoff. You may need to put a little access door so you can access that cutoff for the spigot cutoff in case you want to cut it off in the winter if you're going to have a hard freeze. Where you plan to position your heating and air unit, your heating and air unit is going to have, like the air conditioner in the summertime, is pulling moisture out of the air. Pulling that moisture out of the air and getting the air drier is one thing that keeps you cooler in the summertime, because when the air is dry, your body moisture evaporates quickly and that cools you down. If there's a lot of moisture in the air, even though the temperature indicates a cool reading, you're going to feel warm because of the humidity in the air. So that air conditioner is going to be pulling the humidity out of the air, and it will dump this humidity out of the system in the form of condensation that drains through a condensation line. So what you may want to do is, where the heating and air unit is going to be located, is tell the plumber you'd like to have a drain turned up there for the condensation line. So the heating and air sub can stick that condensation line into that drain. My preference would be that you have a drain in the floor so it can be a gravity flow situation. Okay, you're now ready for your plumbing inspection. And if you want to be there while the plumbing inspector is going through the home, I think that's a good thing to do. And you can walk around with the plumbing inspector. He or she will point out anything there's a problem. They usually find something. I think they got to find something just to warrant the inspection. But you'll be aware of it. The plumber may or may not be there with you. And you can go through and get any comments from the plumbing inspector. As the plumber is winding up, we will have the heating and air sub on the job to do the heating and air system. We refer to as HVAC. On the heating and air, just a couple of things before we get into it. I want to remind you that I really hope that you got a heat loss gain on your heating and air system. If you're in an area where your local power company will do this for you, that's a great way to go, because that way you have an unbiased party doing the heating and air or the heat loss gain. But you want to know that someone did an actual heat loss gain. You don't want the heating and air sub to say that they did it only to find out later they use the old swag system, if you know what I mean by the swag system. Because if they don't do a heat loss gain, you're going to run into two potential problems. One is, one sub will put in too large of a unit, which is going to cost you more, just to cover themselves, so you're not calling them up in the summertime saying, oh, my home's not cool enough. Or you'll have another sub put in too small of a system so his bid looks cheap, and then that's a real problem because you're not going to be comfortable. By doing the heat loss gain, it's going to tell you what size heating and air system you should have, whether it be gas or electric. It doesn't matter. At 24/7, you're going to be able to access quite a bit of information that you can research for your heating and air system, such as going to the Energy Star website and just seeing a lot of their recommendations there. We told you earlier about the Earthcraft home. You'll be able to access that from 24/7, see how to easily get to it. And you're going to see things like your heating and air unit is rated in SEERs, which is Seasonal Energy Efficiency Ratio. And a lot of areas now are mandating that you have a certain size SEER. It's pretty much in a lot of areas where the minimum SEER that they want you to have is a 13. And you can see at 24/7, if you increase the SEERs, how much it might increase the efficiency of your system, or your overall bills. There are some things you can keep adding money to it, but it's kind of like emptying the ashtrays on an airplane to make it lighter. Sure, it's lighter, but no big deal. So there comes a point where adding more is not going to help you that much more. And you'll be able to find this out through some of this information we have at 24/7. But the heating and air sub, they'll go in and install the unit inside the home. Now, if it's a gas system, this will be the gas furnace. If it's a total electric system, this will be the air handler for a heat pump. Now, if you remember from the plan section, I highly stress that this unit be as close to the center of the home or as close to the center of the zone, if you've got multiple zones, as possible. Because if it's close to the center of the zone or home, it's more efficient. The air doesn't have as far to go to travel through the home. And they're going to be running lines from this unit out into the home we call supply lines. And they'll be running units, lines back from the home to this unit we call returns. It's a continuous cycle. Air goes out the supply, in the return, out the supply, in the return. And then, of course, you remember from the plan section that you want to return in every single room except the kitchens and the bath and the laundry room. So you're not picking up any foul odors or smells and spreading them through your home. If you have a gas furnace, you're going to have a pipe that goes up through the home to vent off fumes. We simply just call it a vent pipe. Again, if you can get this vent pipe to the rear of the home, that's what I would prefer so you don't see it from the street. And if you tell them this, they can normally do it. You're going to find, as I mentioned earlier in the program, that one of the biggest detriments to your heating and air system is air infiltration. And one major source of a problem is leaky ductwork. Many of you would be surprised if you could see your ductwork at home. In behind that insulation, that duct tape has pretty much broken down over the years, and the ductwork has separated and it leaks like a sieve, which really destroys the efficiency of your system. So what I recommend, also mentioned earlier, is that they will cover these joints with mastic. It's almost like plaster of Paris. And then on top of this mastic, they put the insulation. You want to be sure that you do this on all your supply lines. I mentioned earlier in the program that I highly recommend the floor registers. Now, if you have floor registers, you want the heating and air sub to cover these registers up. They'll either cover them up with scrap subflooring, or they'll cover them up with scrap sheet metal, but you want to cover them up so they're just not filled with trash during the construction of the home. I recommend you put a small supply line in a large walk-in closet, because a lot of large walk-in closets, they get very hot in the summer and or very cold in the winter. And I'd like for you to put a supply line, a small supply line, in a large walk-in closet to keep it comfortable. If you're not aware of this, wherever you put your supplies, you don't want to block them in the future with furniture or being behind a door or necessarily behind curtains or something like this. You want that supply register where the air can flow out in the room as it should, or blanket that door, exterior door window as it should. So you want to be thinking about how you're going to be positioning furniture and stuff like this on where you position these supplies. And you want to walk around with the heating and air sub, and y'all discuss the location of all these things in the home before they actually install it. You know, he may have given you a rough sketch before you even started on where he thinks he's going to be running all these lines, but a lot of times he's not going to know exactly where everything's going until the rough end, because he needs to see how the framer framed the home. Then they're going to have lines going from different rooms back to the units we call returns. And on the returns, it's okay to put a return behind furniture, behind a door, behind curtains, and they'll work just fine. You don't have to be concerned with this on returns.